Hello.
This is, okay.
All rise.
Madam Registrar, would you please call the case?
Good afternoon, Your Honor. This is case number MICT 18-116 in the matter of the prosecutor versus TURINABO et al., sitting today on 13 September 2018 for the initial appearances of the accused.
Thank you, Madam Registrar, and good afternoon. I'm Judge Vagn Joensen, the single judge assigned to this case. And may I now have the appearances of the parties, starting with the prosecution.
Thank you, Your Honor. The prosecution is represented by me, Veronique Wright, Senior Legal Officer, and with me is Sunkari Balekonte, Legal Officer, Mr. Joshua Rosenberg, Legal Officer, Ms. Tavrula Papadopoulos, Legal Officer, Ms. Irene Booley, Records Management Officer and Case Manager.
Thank you, Madam.
Thank you, Madam.
And now the defense, starting with defense counsel for Mr. Maximilien TURINABO.
Thank you, Your Honor. My name is Elibariki Maeda, and I'm representing Maximilien TURINABO. I am the advocate, actually, of the High Court of Tanzania, and the court subordinate there to except the primary court.
Thank you, counsel. And counsel for Mr. Anselme NZABONIMPA.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. I represent Anselme NZABONIMPA. My name is Charles Hamala, an advocate of the High Court of Kenya. Thank you very much.
Thank you, counsel. And counsel for Mr. Jean de Dieu NDAGIJlMANA.
May it please Your Honor. My name is Wilfred Nderitu, representing Mr. Jean de Dieu NDAGIJlMANA. Thank you.
Thank you. And counsel for Rose FATUMA. Counsel, your microphone.
Je représente Madame Marie-Rose Fatuma. Je m'appelle Maître Gatera Gashabana, avocat au barreau du Rwanda. Je vous remercie.
Thank you, counsel. And lastly, counsel for Dick Prudence MUNYESHULI.
May it please you, Your Honor, my name is Arnold Liza. I'm appearing for Dick Prudence MUNYESHULI, and I'm an advocate of the High Court of Tanzania.
Thank you, counsel. Before we start, can the accused hear the proceedings in a language that they understand? Mr. TURINABO. Do you receive the sound in a language you understand?
ndabyumva rwose mu rurimi rwanjye.
Well, I received something in a language I don't understand, but can we have a translation?
ndabyumva nyakubahwa perezida, ndabyumva mu kinyarwanda.
Oui, oui, je m'appelle.
Where? Yes, please. Mr. TURINABO, I didn't get the answer because we had a problem with the translation. Please repeat what you said.
nyakubahwa perezida, nababwiye ko numva uru rubanza ndi kurukurikira mu kinyarwanda kandi ndabumva neza.
Thank you. And Mr. NZABONIMPA.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Moi aussi, je suis en train de suivre dans ma langue de français correctement et parfaitement.
Thank you. And Mr. NDAGIJlMANA.
Ego ndakurikira muri numva rw'ikinyarwanda. Murakoze.
And Miss Mary Rose Fatuma.
Murakoze, nanjye ndabyumva neza mu rurimi rw'ikinyarwanda.
And finally, Mr. MUNYESHULI.
Thank you, Your Honor. I follow the proceedings in English. Thank you.
Thank you. Before proceeding, I would like to remind the parties that certain information in this case is subject to protective measures and confidentiality orders. This includes confidential information that has been redacted from the indictment as to the identity of certain individuals and the basis for the review proceedings in the Nkebatware case. Confidential information should not be disclosed in open session. To the extent a party is required to refer to any confidential information, you must first indicate the need to go into private session to ensure appropriate measures are taken to prevent public disclosure of confidential information. This is the initial appearance of Mr. Maximilien TURINABO, Mr. Anselme NZABONIMPA, Mr. Jean de Dieu NDAGIJlMANA, Ms. Mary Rose Fatuma, and Mr. Dick Prudence MUNYESHULI. The accused were arrested on 3rd September 2018 and transferred to the United Nations detention facility in Arusha, Tanzania on 11 September 2018. This hearing will be conducted in accordance with Rule 64 of the Mechanisms Rules of Procedure and Evidence, as modified by Rule 90. Before adjourning the hearing, the parties will be provided with the opportunity to raise any additional relevant issues. On 24 August 2018, Judge Sionki Park confirmed an indictment against the accused, charging 2 counts of contempt and 1 charge of incitement to commit contempt of the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda and the mechanism. And I understand that the indictment has been served on each of the accused. Before we continue, I would like to inform the accused that each of you have a fundamental right to remain silent throughout these proceedings, and this will not be held against you. In addition, and without prejudice to your fundamental right to conduct your own defense, you also have a fundamental right to be assisted by counsel. Any arrangements for representation by counsel will be made through the registry. Further, Article 18 and 19 of the mechanism statute guarantee the accused a number of rights and I request the registrar please to read the 2 articles in full. And Madam Registrar, you may remain seated for practical purposes.
Thank you, Your Honor. Article 18, Commencement in Conduct of Trial Proceedings. The single judge or trial chambers conducting a trial shall ensure that the trial is fair and expeditious and that proceedings are conducted in accordance with the rules of procedure and evidence, with full respect for the rights of the accused and due regard for the protection of victims and witnesses. A person against whom an indictment has been confirmed shall, pursuant to an order or an arrest warrant of the mechanism, be taken into custody, immediately informed of the charges against him or her, and transferred to the mechanism. The single judge or judge of the trial chamber, designated by the President, shall read the indictment, ensure that the rights of the accused are respected, confirm that the accused understands the indictment, and instruct the accused to enter a plea. The single judge or trial chamber shall then set the date for trial. The hearing shall be public unless a single judge or trial chamber decides to close the proceedings in accordance with its rules of procedure and evidence. Article 19. Rights of the accused. All persons shall be equal before the mechanism. In the determination of charges against him or her, the accused shall be entitled to a fair and public hearing, subject to Article 20 of the statute. The accused shall be presumed innocent until proved guilty according to the provisions of the present statute. In the determination of any charge against the accused pursuant to the present statute, the accused shall be entitled to the following minimum guarantees in full equality: to be informed promptly and in detail in a language which he or she understands of the nature and cause of the charges against him or her, to have adequate time and facilities for the preparation of his or her defense, and to communicate with counsel of his or her own choosing, to be tried without undue delay, to be tried in his or her presence, and to defend himself or herself in person or through legal assistance of his own choosing, to be informed if he or she does not have legal assistance of this right, and to have legal assistance assigned to him or her in any case where the interests of justice so require, and without payment by him or her in any such case if he or she does not have sufficient means to pay for it. To examine or have examined the witnesses against him or her, and to obtain the attendance and examination of witnesses on his or her behalf under the same conditions as witnesses against him or her. To have the free assistance of an interpreter if he or she cannot understand or speak the language used in the mechanism. And finally, not to be compelled to testify against himself or herself or to confess guilt. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Madam Registrar. It follows from the appearances of the parties that each of the accused are presently represented by counsel. Starting with Mr. Maximilien TURINABO, Can you or your counsel confirm that you have received a copy of the indictment dated 5th June 2018 in your own language, and have you read and understood its contents?
inyandiko narayibonye kandi nayisomye nyumva uretse ko nageze ejo bundi banzana hano Arusha umuzigo wanjye n'impapuro nari mfite zazimiriye ku kibuga cy'indege. Ubu mu gitondo cy'uyu munsi niho nagize amahirwe avoka wanjye ansabira izindi kopi ariko nanyujijemo amaso nta kibazo.
Thank you, Mr. TURINABO. And I ask the same question to Mr. NZABONIMPA. Have you received a copy of the indictment in your own language, and have you read and understood its content?
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Oui, c'est vrai que j'ai reçu les documents dans toutes les langues, anglais, français, kinyarwanda, et je l'ai reçu en français, je l'ai lu et compris. Merci.
Thank you, Mr. NZABONIMPA. And the same question to Mr. NDAGIJlMANA. Did you receive a copy of the document in a language, in your own language, and have you read and understood its contents?
Murakoze Bwana Perezida, inyandiko irimo ibirego byanjye narayibonye kandi nayisomye mu rurimi numva.
Thank you, Mr. NDAGIJlMANA. And Ms. Mary Rose FATUMA, did you receive a copy of the indictment in your own language, and have you read and understood its contents?
Murakoze Perezida, narazibonye kandi narazisomye mu rurimi numva rw'ikinyarwanda.
Thank you, Ms. FATUMA. And finally, Mr. MUNYESHULI, did you receive a copy of the indictment in your own language, and have you read and understood its contents?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you. In accordance with Rule 64 of the rules, you are entitled to have the indictment read out to you in court today. Do you wish to have the indictment read out to you, or do you waive your right in this regard? Mr. TURINABO.
Your Honor, my client would wish, because he has gone through the indictment and he understood them, so he will wish to plead or to be like generally read. So he understood and he'll be ready to proceed.
He wants it read out, or does he waive his? He waives his right. Thank you. And Mr. NZABONIMPA, do you want the indictment to be read out in court, or do you waive your right?
Non, ce n'est pas nécessaire de faire la lecture de ce document.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. NZABONIMPA. And Mr. NDAGIJlMANA, do you want the indictment to be read out in court, or do you waive your right?
Si ngombwa ko biyongera gusubirwamo kuko nabisomye ku buryo buhagije kandi nanasobanukiwe. Murakoze.
Thank you, Mr. NDAGIJlMANA. And Ms. FATUMA, do you want the indictment read out, or do you waive your right?
Si ngombwa ko bayisubiramo, narayisomye bihagije. Murakoze.
Thank you, Ms. Fatuma and Mr. Munyeshuli. You want it read out, or do you waive your right?
I wanted to be read out.
Okay.
Thank you.
Madam, it presents a problem in relation to the public. The indictment in this case contains information subject to protective measures and confidentiality orders. So I would kindly request that we move into private session for the reading of this indictment. It means to the public that the audio line to the public gallery will be suspended while we read out. Madam Registrar, will you read out the indictment? Please remain seated while doing so. We are now
We're-
back in open session.
Thank you.
And I continue to the pleas, if any, of the parties of the accused. I would like to ask each of the accused, starting with Mr. Maximilien TURINABO, if you have had the opportunity to discuss the charges in the indictment against you with your counsel, and if you are prepared to enter a plea at this time.
murakoze nyakubahwa perezida. Ibyaha prokirere arega byose ahangaha muri uru ruhame ni umuntu tumenyereye ku buryo buhagije, ni ibintu by'ibipapirano, ntabwo ari ukuva none, kuko abantu bo kwa prokirere kuva urubanza rwangira abatware rwatangira bakomeje bihagije gukora urugomo ku bantu bagize defense yangira abatware. Natanga urugero mu magambo make.
Mr. TURINABO, this is too early to address the substance of the indictment. At this point, I only need to know if you have discussed the charges with your counsel and if you are prepared to enter a plea of guilty or not guilty at this moment. Please limit your answer to those two issues.
Murakoze nyakubahwa perezida, ibirego bya procureur simbyemera byose ko abivuze hariya.
So I take it that you have discussed the charges with your counsel and you want to plead. You have to stand up while you plead.
Murakoze nyakubahwa perezida, ibyaha byose n'urutonde by'ibirego procureur avugiye muri uru rukiko simbyemera mu ngingo zabyo byose. Murakoze.
Thank you, Mr. TURINABO. And now I turn to Mr. NZABONIMPA. Have you had the opportunity to discuss the charges with your counsel, and are you prepared to enter a plea today?
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je plaide non coupable. Monsieur le Président, merci.
Yeah. And I note you were standing while you made your plea, and I assume you also confirmed that you had discussed this matter with your counsel.
Ok, Monsieur le Président, vous avez raison.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. And now I turn to Mr. NDAGIJlMANA. Mr. NDAGIJlMANA. Sorry. Have you discussed the charges with your counsel, and are you ready to plead?
murakoze nyakubahwa perezida. Nabonye umwanya uringaniye wo kuganira n'avoka wanjye kuri ibi birego procureur ndega muri ibaruwa nako muri inyandiko, kandi ibi birego andega byose ndabihakana ko nta kuri bishingiyeho. Murakoze.
Well, thank you, Mr. NDAGIJlMANA. I know that you were standing up while making your plea. And I turn to Ms. Mary Rose FATUMA. Have you discussed the charges with your counsel, and are you ready to plead?
murakoze perezida avoka twarabiganiriye bihagije maze gusobanukirwa n'ibikubiye muri iki kirego cyatanzwe n'ubushinjacyaha ndamenyesha urukiko yuko ibyaha ndegwa ntabyemera murakoze.
Thank you, Madam. And finally, Mr. MUNYESHULI, have you discussed with your counsel, and are you ready to plead?
Thank you, Your Honor. I had the opportunity to discuss the charges with my counsel, and I'm ready to enter my plea. But before enter my plea, I would like to have explanation regarding the allegation against me. The allegation has two legs. The first being having disclosed the protected identities of protected witness to Maximilien. But the second one, I don't understand.
Well,
count 3, and Dick Prudence MUNYESHULI is criminally responsible for having prohibited indirect contact with them. I don't understand what that means.
No. Well, Mr. Mr. MUNYESHULI, your issues are now in the record, and they can be raised in a preliminary motion, which I will address later in this hearing.
Okay.
So if we can continue with the two issues, did you discuss with your counsel, and are you ready to plead?
I'm ready to plead,
Okay.
Your Honor.
Please do.
I plead not guilty of all charges.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
And you did so standing, I note. So we have a plea from all of the 5 accused of not guilty. Another issue I have to inform you about in this hearing is that the Article 1.4 of the statute of the mechanism requires that I consider the transfer of this case to authorities of a state in accordance with Article 6 of the statute. In light of this obligation, and because the accused were arrested in Rwanda and the offences charged in the indictment occurred there, I will probably motu issue an order in due course seeking submissions from the government of Rwanda as to its willingness and ability to try this case. The order will also set forth a briefing schedule for the parties to file submissions in response to those filed by the government of Rwanda. In the event that the case is not transferred pursuant to Article 6 of the mechanism statute, a date will be set for the commencement of the trial in accordance with Rule 64B, Roman 1 of the rules. Trial preparations will take place in accordance with Rules 69 and 70 of the rules. Another issue which I briefly embarked upon in relation to Mr. MUNYESHULI's intervention is that Rule 90 provides that the time limits in Rule 64, which are 30 days for entering of the final guilty plea and for the prosecution's disclosure of the material underpinning the indictment, and for motions prior to the trial is only 10 days in these cases. However, you may, if you show good cause, request an extension of this time limit. You can do it today, and then we will issue an order in due course, or you can do it in writing later. At this point, I would like to ask the parties whether they have other issues that they would like to raise. And again, I remind the parties to give prior notice should any submission require the disclosure of confidential information, so that appropriate measures may be taken. Any issues on the part of the prosecution?
No issues, Your Honor.
Thank you.
For the moment, yeah.
And if we follow the order of the indictment, Mr. TURINABO, any issues? As I said, you don't have to raise them now. You can always do it in writing later.
nyakubahwa perezida nidusanga nyakubahwa perezida nidusanga ari ngombwa ko twandikaho dufite iyo minsi 10 tuzabyandika, ariko kuri ubu ngubu nta kibazo mfite.
Well, thank you, Mr. TURINABO and Mr. NZABONIMPA.
Merci bien, Monsieur le Président. Pour le moment, je n'ai pas de questions à poser. Merci.
Thank you, and Mr. NDAGIJlMANA.
murakoze bwana perezida. Ibyo mbona nabaza muri uru rubanza ubwo hari iminsi 10 iteganijwe nzabyohereza mu nyandiko. Murakoze.
Okay. Oh, thank you. And Ms. Fatuma?
murakoze. Nanjye iyo minsi 10 muduhaye nta kibazo mfite, nayihanganira nkazabitanga. Murakoze.
Thank you, Ms. Fatuma. And finally, MUNYESHULI, apart from what you have already raised.
Thank you, Your Honor. We will be submitting motion in due course.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Finally, I would also like to inform the accused that they may request provisional release pursuant to Rule 68 of the rules, in that it will be dealt with in the written rulings. And it also entails that the government of Tanzania and possibly Rwanda will have to be consulted. This concludes today's hearing. I thank the parties for their attendance and adjourn these proceedings. Thank you.
All rise.